Welcome to Encountering Christ, a podcast about meeting Jesus in the ordinary moments of life, learning how to invite others into those encounters, and exploring practical ways to recognize Jesus at work in our daily rhythms. Our prayer is that this time helps you see and share Christ more clearly. Today we're continuing our look at sin and talking about the origin of sin. Where did sin come from? How did it come into the universe? Well, before we talk about that, we must establish one thing, and it is this: God himself did not, has not, and will not sin ever. In addition, it would also be wrong to say that God should be blamed for sin or the consequences of it. As James wrote in chapter 1, each one sins when by his own evil desires he is dragged away and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Now, that is a lot about the nature of sin. See, sin is preceded by a personal desire for something evil, something that is against the nature of God. And that desire for something evil will drag us away from God and entice us to go a different path. Now, James uses a metaphor in saying that evil desire conceives something in us. And just like with the birth of a baby, once it is conceived, it is already real. It is going to happen, for the unstoppable process has already been conceived. Then it gives birth to sin. And what is sin? Any failure to conform to the nature or moral law of God in act, attitude, or nature. So, is sin an act, an attitude, or a nature? And the answer is yes. Well, then James says, once sin is full grown, it gives birth to death. And here's the point. Just like with any human, once we are born and now alive, the clock is already ticking. There will come a day when we will die. This is where the truth and the metaphor come together. Death is the result of sin. It is the natural consequences of sin. But what is death? Well, yes, our earthly understanding is that death is the loss of life. But what about in eternity? Well, in eternity, death is also defined as the loss of life. But the definition of life is a bit different. In this world, the definition of life has to do with biological functioning. But in eternity, the loss of life is defined as a loss of being in the presence of God. For truly, life is only found in the presence of God. The loss of the presence of God is truly what death is. And here's the truth of sin put simply. If you sin, you will surely die. This is our human condition, and it is our fault. For God created us with the choice to follow him and love him, or to reject him and ignore him. We have a choice, but each of us in our own time chooses to reject the Lord in sin. And we do so willingly and often, just like Adam and Eve. And yet again, God takes an incredibly profound truth and makes it simple for us to understand. See, all of this is understood by simply reading Genesis 3. Adam and Eve's eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is at the heart of sin. And so let's delve into that briefly. And let's look at three aspects of why we choose to eat the fruit, because this is at the heart of sin. Well, first, Adam and Eve's sin struck at the basis for knowledge, for it gave a different answer to the question, what is true? See, God told Adam and Eve, if you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And the serpent said, you will not die. In other words, he's saying, that's not true. Well, of course, the serpent is Satan, which lets us know sin and death really existed in eternity before the world began. Of course, Satan had already been separated from God as he was cast out of heaven, along with a third of the angels who followed him. Evil and death already existed. However, just like the eternal creatures that fell, God didn't create us to sin either, nor did he create us with an evil nature. Just like Satan, we choose it on our own. And just like Adam and Eve, we doubt the truth of God. He says, if we eat the fruit, we will surely die. And we question that. just as Satan tempts us to follow him by believing his lie that says, you're not going to die. We're just like Adam and Eve, and we question whether evil is bad or not. We, too, don't believe that the knowledge of good and evil is bad. In other words, we make the same decision. The only thing that's different between us and Adam and Eve is that they were created in an environment that was perfect in the presence of God, perfect in the fact that there was no evil there, nor any knowledge of evil. But because of their sin, we grew up in a different environment. It is through Adam and Eve that we all have a knowledge of good and evil. For none of us is created and lives in the Garden of Eden, where we are protected from this knowledge. We live in the world, a place where the knowledge of good and evil is before us every day. Well, what is good? Well, the nature and presence of God. What is evil? The rejection of and doubting of the nature and the presence of God. You see, we grow up seeing both. And faced with the choice, one of the things that we reject and doubt is that who God is and what God says are true. At the heart of sin is a belief that who God is and what God says are not true. God says that there is nowhere we can go that he is not present, yet we continually doubt that truth. We continually think that we can hide things from God. We continually think that our internal thoughts are seen and heard only by us. We don't just doubt the omnipresence of God. We will at one time or another doubt everything that is true about him at one time or another. I mean, we'll doubt his power, his love, his grace, his knowledge, his faithfulness, and on it goes. Before it's all said and done, we will, in one way or another, doubt and even deny the truth of God, and that is sin. The second thing we learn about sin from Adam and Eve is that their sin struck at the basis of moral standards, for it gave a different answer to the question of what is right. So first was what is true. But secondly, sin is a different answer to the question of what is right. God had said that it was morally right for Adam and Eve not to eat from the fruit of that one tree. But the serpent suggested that it would be right to eat of the fruit, and that in eating it, Adam and Eve would become like God. So Eve took the first step and trusted her own opinion of what was right or wrong. She trusted her own opinion of what would be good for her instead of trusting God's words. She determined that by eating the fruit, it would make her wise. And then she proclaimed that it was good and gave some to Adam, and he too believed her over God. Our world is full of people who challenge whether God is right or not. This is overt in our world's desire to adopt a way of thinking that says we determine who we are, not God. For a person to say, I determine whether I am male or female or a cat, not God or anyone else, this is an overt and obvious rejection of God being right. But it isn't just those people out there that do this. We all do this. We all have beliefs in our lives, either in the way we think or the way we act or the way we live our lives, where we actually believe that we are right and God is wrong. In fact, every sin we commit, whether it be lust, greed, lying, selfishness, and on, in every sin we are saying that we are right and God is wrong. At the heart of sin is a lot of things. And one of those things is that we believe we are right and God is wrong, and we simply go ahead and eat the fruit. So at the heart of sin is questioning God on what is true, on what is right, and thirdly, it's questioning God on who am I. The correct answer was that Adam and Eve were creatures of God, dependent on him, and always to be subordinate to him as their creator and Lord. But Adam and Eve succumbed to the temptation that they could be like God, thus attempting to put themselves in the place of God, whether that be in their lives or in the world. Not only do these three scenarios play themselves out in Genesis 3, they are a depiction of mankind throughout the Bible, and they are a depiction of mankind throughout the history of the world. And not only that, they are a depiction of me. Even as a pastor, I still struggle in all of these areas. I still have to catch myself from thinking that I know better, that I know a better way than God does. And what I've noticed about myself is that the more and more I know about God, the more and more it reveals to me how sinful I really am. But constantly I think to myself that I know a better way than God does, that I can do things that you can't do things God's way in the world that we live in, that I'm the one in charge of me and no one else has charge over me, including God. See, Paul saw himself as the worst of sinners, not just in the past, but in the present. All of us are sinners against God. Yet we live in a culture that absolutely believes that most of mankind, including ourselves, do more good things than bad things. We still struggle to see our own sinfulness. And here's the big reason why. When it comes to behaving correctly, we tend to look to ourselves and what benefits us instead of looking at the nature of God. And here's the truth. If I'm going to have any chance of ridding myself of sin, I must know Christ. Because through Jesus Christ, I find my need for forgiveness. I find the rightness and perfectness of God, and I find the grace of God. And more than that, it is through Jesus Christ that I can truly know and be reestablished in a relationship with God. It's through Jesus Christ that I can be in the presence of God, which is the reason for my existence. For truly, that is where holiness and truth and life are found, and nowhere else. For we were created to be in the presence of God, for it is in Christ that we are set free from sin and death, and are now free to be who we were created to be. Jesus is the answer for my sin. As you go through your day today, don't miss out. Find Jesus and walk with him.